Now then, the Scottish National Party will launch a new case for Scottish independence this summer, whatever the outcome of the EU referendum. It's only 18 months, of course, since Scotland voted to remain part of the United Kingdom. Well, I'm joined now by the SNP's business spokesperson, Hannah Bardell. She's live at their conference in Glasgow. Very good morning to you, Hannah Bardell. Well, you know, what's all this about a new independence referendum campaign? Your own leader said it was a once-in-a-generation vote.
What this is about is saying that we respect the outcome of the referendum in 2014, but we want to continue to make that case. We are the Scottish National Party, we are the party of independence. That has never changed, but we want to continue to stand up for Scotland against Westminster's austerity cuts and to make a positive case for independence, to show that Scotland can be prosperous and can be a nation that stands on its own 2 feet and does things differently, as we have prone in government in Scotland.
Take all that on board, but what about the once-in-a-generation bit? You know, that's got to be at least, what, 20, 30 years?
Well, what we have said very clearly is that this will be a matter for the people of Scotland. That if the people of Scotland decide, and there is, you know, demonstrable evidence that another referendum is what the people of Scotland want, then we will listen to that and we will put that forward, and we will continue to make a positive case for Scotland being able to be an independent country. You know, we recognise that some people weren't convinced by our arguments, and as the First Minister said yesterday, you know, we are doing things differently in Scotland. We are making people's lives better against the backdrop of Westminster austerity cuts.
And do you think part of that listening to the people of Scotland, as you put it, clearly you can't have a referendum about having a referendum, so you're just going to listen. Do you think you will hear the cry come more loudly if the UK as a whole should vote to leave the EU?
All the polls are suggesting that a majority of people in Scotland are against leaving the European Union. That's not to say that there are not people that do want to leave, but we believe that we should have the opportunity to make that decision for ourselves, not be dragged out against our will as part of the United Kingdom. And, you know, it's disrespectful to the people, not just of Scotland, but the rest of the UK, to be rushing into this EU referendum. You know, around 6 weeks after we're going to have had elections in the devolved administrations across the UK. You know, the independence referendum in Scotland changed politics. It gave people the opportunity to have a say in their own future and to really engage and understand what a yes vote would look like. We're not going to have that opportunity in the EU referendum because David Cameron is rushing to the finish line to try and get us to stay in without making the case positively and engaging people in the way that we did when we set a gold standard for having referendums.
Well, when it comes to making your own decisions, making Scottish decisions in Scotland, a lot of people listening are going to be saying, well, sauce for the goose, etc. What about this Sunday trading vote? I mean, first of all, reports are that the SNP ratted on a deal with the Conservatives to abstain, offered Stuart Hosey a seat in the Privy Council and things like that. But the SNP ratted on that deal to cause the Conservative government embarrassment.
Well, what I would say, Dermot, is you shouldn't believe everything that you read in the press. And I was part of that engagement with businesses, individuals, trade unions, you know, to listen and to understand what the concerns were. And we were very clear at the time when the proposals were brought forward, and we were very clear last week. This was about premium pay for some of the poorest paid workers, the lowest paid workers, not just in Scotland, but across the UK. And it was very clear to me and to my colleagues on the SNP that if those changes were made, there could have a potential knock-on impact to those receiving premium pay, so we had no option but to vote against it.
Convoluted formula, some would say. Well, what happened when it came to fox hunting then? What was your economic argument there when you vetoed the equalisation of the laws in Scotland and England?
Sorry, could you repeat that question? I didn't quite catch it, my apologies.
So you've got previous, haven't you, of meddling in so-called English-only affairs, which Nicola Sturgeon said she wouldn't do, when it came to changes to fox hunting, to make the law in England and Wales more or less the same as that which pertains in Scotland. Again, the SNP embarrassed the government on that one. Was there an economic argument for that?
Well, there was an argument from people not just in Scotland but across the UK contacting us in vast numbers to say they wanted us to vote against this. So, you know, we will always do what we believe is the right thing for not just Scotland but the rest of the United Kingdom, while we are part of the UK and while we are still part of Westminster, we said that we would be a progressive force in Westminster and we would work with others to pursue progressive policies. And that's what we did, specifically in the case of Sunday trading.
How many people contacted you, these vast numbers, about fox hunting? How many people from England?
Oh, well, there was certainly, for myself, hundreds. You know, if you multiply that across the various members, then, you know, that's a significant number. But, you know, the point there is that,
this is a nation of over 60 million. This is a nation that the UK has more than 60 million people in it.
Well, do you want to get into an argument about, you know, the details of fox hunting, or do you want to talk about the real issues that are facing us, you know, such as the budget next week, the kind of cuts that are going to be coming down the line from the Chancellor, you know, the EU referendum? All of the parties, you know, the two main parties in Westminster, Labour and the Conservatives, are split over this. The SNP continues to be a strong and united voice to stay in the EU, to make a positive case.
Well, with respect, Ms Bardell, we are talking about important issues. The judgments that the SNP makes when it comes to voting on UK matters and matters that affect England and Wales, and not, it seems, Scotland. The judgments, the decisions you make to do that.
Absolutely, and in terms of Sunday trading, it was very clear that there was going to be a knock-on impact, not just for Scotland, but for the rest of the UK in terms of those low-paid workers in the retail sector. So we were absolutely clear it was the right thing to do. The government, in contrast, was not able to bring forward its own impact assessment till the day of the vote. How disrespectful is that to Parliament, and not just to the voters in Scotland, but in the other parts of the United Kingdom? So, you know, we worked with all of our colleagues across the House to understand what the concerns were, to also understand what the concerns were across society, in the retail sector, in the trade unions, and it was very clear
there are people who would question those judgments, but on the issue of fox hunting, now you've been very clear about this, that the SNP made the judgment to oppose the change in the law in England and Wales because of the number of English people who had contacted you. Therefore, the SNP is making a judgment that it represents people who don't vote for it, who can't vote for it because the SNP doesn't stand south of the border, that you represent them as well.
Well, you know, as we said, in the 2015 election, we would be a progressive force. We would work positively with other parties where there were opportunities to protect, you know, not just the people of these islands, but, you know, the animals, the wildlife. We've just, you know, done quite a significant campaign on saving the Wildlife Crime Unit, which the UK government was going to pull funding from. That's headquartered in my constituency in Livingston, and we've secured funding over the next 4 years. So, you know, there is another example where we are willing to listen, not just to people in Scotland, but people across the UK. And it was people in Scotland that contacted us as well. But there was a great opportunity to, you know, do something positive and save, you know, the wildlife and the foxes in England and in other parts of the United Kingdom.
OK, must end it there. Hannah Bardell, thank you very much indeed.